Chapter 5. Pilate's report. And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people, and, behold, I, having examined him before you, have found no fault in this man touching those things whereof ye accuse him. Luke 23 verses 13 to 14. This chapter deals with a rare manuscript written by Pilate, the Roman governor over Judea. In his Bible handbook, Henry Halley gives an excellent overview of the relationship between Pilate and Jesus. Pilate was Roman governor of Judea, 26 to 37 AD. He assumed office about the time that Jesus began his public ministry. His official residence was at Caesarea. He came to Jerusalem at time of feasts to keep order. He was merciless, cruel, noted for his habitual brutality. Like the Roman emperors of his day, he rather enjoyed the spectacle of the torture and death of a man. At one time he had mingled the blood of Galileans with their sacrifices. Luke 13 verse 1. One of the strangest pictures in history is the impression that Jesus made on this hard-hearted Roman governor. Whether Jesus was erect and handsome, as one tradition has it, or stoop-shouldered and ugly, as another tradition has it, there must have been something about his countenance and bearing so divine, so commanding, that although he was dressed in the robes of mock royalty, with the crown of thorns on his head, and the blood streaming down his face, Pilate could not keep his eyes off him. Pilate's effort to get out of crucifying Jesus is a pitiful story. He did not want to do it. He appealed from the Jewish rulers to Herod. Then from Herod back to the rulers. Then from the rulers to the multitudes. Then when the multitudes turned against Jesus, Pilate tried to appeal to their pity, by having Jesus scourged, in hope that they would be satisfied with partial punishment, and not require him to go all the way to crucifixion. Failing in that, he did not finally make up his mind to crucify Jesus till the Jews threatened to report him to Caesar. Not till it began to look as if it might cost him his position as governor of Judea did he at last give his consent to the death of Jesus. Pilate is said to have committed suicide. Pilate's wife, Procula, tradition says, became a Christian. Bible Handbook, Henry Halley, page 414. Rivkin's book is written from a Jewish point of view with numerous quotes from Jewish records. Although there is nothing wrong with using those records, it has a tendency to steer us off the main track upon which this quest was started. Other records have been discovered which have also given us a better insight to what happened in those turbulent days. A couple of these records were found and printed by the Reverend W. D. Mahan. How he found these records is in itself a very interesting story. He wrote, sometime in the year 1856, while living in DeWitt, Missouri, a gentleman by the name of H.C. Weideman became snowbound and stopped at my house several days. He was a native of Germany, and one of the most learned men I had ever met. I found him to be freely communicative. During his stay, he told me that he had spent 5 years in the city of Rome, and most of the time in the Vatican, where he saw a library containing 560,000 volumes. He told me that he had seen and read the records of Tiberius Caesar, and in what was called the Acta Pilati, that is, the Acts of Pilate, he had seen an account of the apprehension, trial, and crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth, but said it did not add much to the commonly accepted teachings of Christianity. He told me he thought a transcript could be secured. After Mr. Weideman's departure, I meditated upon what he had told me of those records, and thought that if a transcript could be obtained, it would be very interesting, even if it did not add much to the present teachings of Christianity. Reverend Mahan wrote to H.C. Weideman, who soon answered back. Reverend W. D. Mahan, March 2, 1857. Dear Sir, it is with the kindest regards I remembered your hospitality while with you in America. Be assured, anything I can do for you will afford me great pleasure. I have written to Father Frelinghuysen, a monk of great learning, at Rome, who is the chief guardian of the Vatican. I have made the request in my own name, as I do not think they would be willing for such a document to go into the hands of the public. When he answers, I will write you again. I am your most obedient servant. 1. C. Weideman. Westphalia, Germany. November 27, 1857. Reverend W. D. Mahan. Dear Sir, Father Freelandhuisen has answered my letter in regard to the transcript you want. He informs me that the writing is so fine, and being in the Latin language, as I told you, and the parchment so old and dirty, he will be obliged to use a glass to the most of it. He can only give it in the Latin, as he does not understand the English. He says he will do it for 35 derricks, which will be in American coin $62.44. If you will forward the amount, we'll have the document forwarded to my brother-in-law, C. Vantberger. He will translate it for a trifle. I am yours, in tender regards. 1. C. Weidemann. Mahan put a great deal of sacrifice, money and time into the exploration of ancient records, especially those connected with the life and death of Christ. When he got a hold of the report of Pilate, he experienced a new enthusiasm to do research on these ancient records. He wrote, "Upon getting hold of this report of Pilate, I commenced to investigate this subject, and after many years of trial and the expenditure of considerable money, I found that there were many of such records still preserved at the Vatican in Rome and at Constantinople. That had been carried there by the Emperor of Rome about the middle of the 3rd century. I therefore procured the necessary assistance, and on September 21, 1883, I set sail for those foreign lands to make the investigation in person. Believing that no event of such importance to the world as the death of Jesus of Nazareth could have transpired without some record being made of it by his enemies in their courts, legislations, and histories, I commenced investigating the subject." The Archco volume, page 13. Reverend Mahan read accounts that Pope Gregory IX had burned all of the old and ancient manuscripts, but he thought that odd because the Catholics had been very avid supporters of anything pertaining to Christ. Then he read accounts of how the Jews had burned most of those ancient records when they could find them. That didn't make much sense either because he knew they would want to have verification of what really happened. Then Mahan discovered that some monks had forged many records in the early years of Christianity, but this wouldn't be any reason to destroy them. He said, "A difficulty I met in consulting scholars on this subject was the claim that the Roman monks had forged many manuscripts regarding Jesus Christ, in the Middle Ages. Now they may have forged some things to sustain their peculiar views and doctrines, something to sustain their church, but there is nothing in this book to sustain Catholicism, and if every word of it was forgotten, it would add nothing to that church more than to any other church." The Archco volume, page 17. We do know that many important things in the Bible were changed through the years by translators and copyists. They thought they were improving the manuscript while some were deliberately misdirecting the truth. From the Book of Mormon we have this witness. "And the angel of the Lord said unto me, Thou hast beheld that the book proceeded forth from the mouth of a Jew, and when it proceeded forth from the mouth of a Jew it contained the plainness of the gospel of the Lord, of whom the 12 apostles bear record, and they bear record according to the truth which is in the Lamb of God. Wherefore, these things go forth from the Jews in purity unto the Gentiles, according to the truth which is in God. And after they go forth by the hand of the 12 apostles of the Lamb, from the Jews unto the Gentiles, thou sayest the foundation of a great and abominable church, which is most abominable above all other churches, for behold, they have taken away from the gospel of the Lamb many parts which are plain and most precious. And also many covenants of the Lord have they taken away. And all this have they done that they might pervert the right ways of the Lord, that they might blind the eyes and harden the hearts of the children of men. Wherefore, thou sayest that after the book hath gone forth through the hands of the great and abominable church, that there are many plain and precious things taken away from the book, which is the book of the Lamb of God. And after these plain and precious things were taken away, it goeth forth unto all the nations of the Gentiles, and after it goeth forth unto all the nations of the Gentiles, yea, even across the many waters which thou hast seen with the Gentiles which have gone forth out of captivity. Thou sayest, because of the many plain and precious things which have been taken out of the book, which were plain unto the understanding of the children of men, according to the plainness which is in the Lamb of God, because of these things which are taken away out of the gospel of the Lamb, an exceeding great many do stumble, yea, insomuch that Satan hath great power over them. I Nephi 13:24-29. The manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible were compiled in the 2nd century, but they were never translated until 607 AD by Bishop Edhelm under the direction of King Alfred. The whole history of the Bible and related manuscripts could fill several books. It seems to be the hand of providence that they survived as well as they did without more changes and deletions than there were, although there were plenty of those. Mahan said that, a man will have a higher appreciation of the Catholic Church, where he sees her enthroned in the hearts of this great church, and I shall ever have a different feeling toward them from what I have had. Page 47, he realized that they had over 500,000 old manuscripts. It is no wonder that they said they found the Pilate document by accident. Reverend Mahan received the translation of the Acts of Pilate, after which he spent many years and much money to verify it, and search out other documents of similar nature. He gathered money and translators and went to Rome and Constantinople to look for other documents. Reverend Mahan discovered that Vallius Paterculus, a Roman historian, was 19 years old when Jesus was born. He apparently was a friend of Caesar, and for 16 years had commanded in Caesar's army. He returned to Rome in the year 31 AD and finished a work called Historia Romania. Vallius said that while he was in Judea, he met a man called Jesus who was known to have cured people of their illnesses. He also said that the Jews were divided in their opinion of him, the poorer class accepting him, but the richer class calling him an Egyptian necromancer, but nevertheless, they were afraid of him. This document was found in the Vatican in Rome, and Vallius was the historian who recorded Pilate's report to Caesar. Included here is the translation of this report. Pilate's report. To Tiberius Caesar, Emperor of Rome. Noble sovereign, greeting. The events of the last few days in my province have been of such a character that I will give the details in full as they occurred, as I should not be surprised if, in the course of time, they may change the destiny of our nation, for it seems of late that all the gods have ceased to be propitious. I am almost ready to say, cursed be the day that I succeeded Valerius Flacius in the government of Judea, for since then my life has been one of continual uneasiness and distress. On my arrival at Jerusalem I took possession of the praetorium, and ordered a splendid feast to be prepared, to which I invited the Tetrarch of Galilee, with the high priest and his officers. At the appointed hour no guests appeared. This I considered an insult offered to my dignity, and to the whole government which I represent. A few days after, the high priest deigned to pay me a visit. His deportment was grave and deceitful. He pretended that his religion forbade him and his attendants to sit at the table of the Romans, and eat and offer libations with them, but this was only a sanctimonious seeming, for his very countenance betrayed his hypocrisy. Although I thought it expedient to accept his excuse, from that moment I was convinced that the conquered had declared themselves the enemy of the conquerors, and I would warn the Romans to beware of the high priests of this country. They would betray their own mother to gain office and a luxurious living. It seems to me that, of conquered cities, Jerusalem is the most difficult to govern. So turbulent are the people that I live in momentary dread of an insurrection. I have not soldiers sufficient to suppress it. I had only 1 centurion and 100 men at my command. I requested a reinforcement from the prefect of Syria, who informed me that he had scarcely troops sufficient to defend his own province. An insatiate thirst for conquest to extend our empire beyond the means of defending it, I fear, will be the cause of the final overthrow of our whole government. I lived secluded from the masses, for I did not know what those priests might influence the rabble to do, yet I endeavored to ascertain, as far as I could, the mind and standing of the people. Among the various rumors that came to my ears, there was one in particular that attracted my attention. A young man, it was said, had appeared in Galilee preaching with a noble unction a new law in the name of the God that had sent him. At first I was apprehensive that his design was to stir up the people against the Romans, but my fears were soon dispelled. Jesus of Nazareth spoke rather as friend of the Romans than of the Jews. On entering the praetorium I found Manlius, who related to me the words Jesus had pronounced at Silo. Never have I read in the works of the philosophers anything that can compare to the maxims of Jesus. One of the rebellious Jews, so numerous in Jerusalem, having asked Jesus if it was lawful to give tribute to Caesar, he replied, "Render unto Caesar the things that belong to Caesar, and unto God the things that are God's." It was on account of the wisdom of his sayings that I granted so much liberty to the Nazarene, for it was in my power to have had him arrested, and exiled to Pontus, but that would have been contrary to the justice which has always characterized the Roman government in all its dealings with men. This man was neither seditious nor rebellious. I extended to him my protection, unknown perhaps to himself. He was at liberty to act, to speak, to assemble and address the people, and to choose disciples, unrestrained by any praetorian mandate. This unlimited freedom granted to Jesus provoked the Jews, not the poor, but the rich and powerful. It is true, Jesus was severe on the latter, and this was a political reason, in my opinion, for not restraining the liberty of the Nazarene. Scribes and Pharisees, he would say to them, you are a race of vipers, you resemble painted sepulchres, you appear well unto men, but you have death within you. At other times he would sneer at the alms of the rich and proud, telling them that the mite of the poor was more precious in the sight of God. Complaints were daily made at the praetorium against the insolence of Jesus. I was even informed that some misfortune would befall him, that it would not be the first time that Jerusalem had stoned those who called themselves prophets. An appeal would be made to Caesar. However, my conduct was approved by the Senate, and I was promised a reinforcement after the termination of the Parthian War. Previously to this, Herod called on me at the praetorium, and, on rising to take leave, after some trifling conversation, asked me what was my opinion concerning the Nazarene. I replied that Jesus appeared to me to be one of those great philosophers that great nations sometimes produced, that his doctrines were by no means sacrilegious, and that the intentions of Rome were to leave him to that freedom of speech which was justified by his actions. Herod smiled maliciously, and, saluting me with ironical respect, departed. The great feast of the Jews was approaching, and the intention was to avail themselves of the popular exultation which always manifests itself at the solemnities of a Passover. The city was overflowing with a tumultuous populace, clamoring for the death of the Nazarene. My emissaries informed me that the treasure of the temple had been employed in bribing the people. The danger was pressing. A Roman centurion had been insulted. I wrote to the prefect of Syria for 100 foot soldiers and as many cavalry. He declined. Three powerful parties had combined together at that time against Jesus. First, the Herodians and the Sadducees, whose seditious conduct seemed to have proceeded from double motives. They hated the Nazarene and were impatient of the Roman yoke. They never forgave me for having entered the holy city with banners that bore the image of the Roman emperor, and although in this instance I had committed a fatal error, yet the sacrilege did not appear less heinous in their eyes. Another grievance also rankled in their bosoms. I had proposed to employ a part of the treasure of the temple in erecting edifices for public use. My proposal was scorned. The Pharisees were the avowed enemies of Jesus. They cared not for the government. They bore with bitterness the severe reprimands which the Nazarene for 3 years had been continually giving them wherever he went. Timid and too weak to act by themselves, they had embraced the quarrels of the Herodians and the Sadducees. Besides these three parties, I had to contend against the reckless and profligate populace, always ready to join a sedition, and to profit by the disorder and confusion that resulted therefrom. Jesus was dragged before the high priest and condemned to death. It was then that the high priest, Caiaphas, performed a divisory act of submission. He sent his prisoner to me to confirm his condemnation and secure his execution. I answered him that, as Jesus was a Galilean, the affair came under Herod's jurisdiction, and ordered him to be sent thither. The wily tetrarch professed humility, and, protesting his deference to the lieutenant of Caesar, he committed the fate of the man to my hands. Soon my palace assumed the aspect of a besieged citadel. Every moment increased the number of the malcontents. Jerusalem was inundated with crowds from the mountains of Nazareth. All Judea appeared to be pouring into the city. By this time the marble stair groaned under the weight of the multitude. The Nazarene was brought back to me. I proceeded to the halls of justice, followed by my guard, and asked the people in a severe tone what they demanded. The death of the Nazarene, was the reply. For what crime? He has blasphemed, he has prophesied the ruin of the temple, he calls himself the Son of God, the Messiah, the King of the Jews. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Roman justice, said I, punishes not such offenses with death. Crucify him. Crucify him, cried the relentless rabble. The vociferations of the infuriated mob shook the palace to its foundations. There was but one who appeared to be calm in the midst of the vast multitude. It was the Nazarene. After many fruitless attempts to protect him from the fury of his merciless persecutors, I adopted a measure which at the moment appeared to me to be the only one that could save his life. I proposed, as it was their custom to deliver a prisoner on such occasions, to release Jesus and let him go free, that he might be the scapegoat, as they called it, but they said Jesus must be crucified. I then spoke to them of the inconsistency of their course as being incompatible with their laws, showing that no criminal judge could pass sentence on a criminal unless he had fasted one whole day, and that the sentence must have the consent of the Sanhedrin, and the signature of the president of that court. That no criminal could be executed on the same day his sentence was fixed, and the next day, on the day of his execution, the Sanhedrin was required to review the whole proceeding. Also, according to their law, a man was stationed at the door of the court with a flag, and another a short way off on horseback to cry the name of the criminal and his crime, and the names of his witnesses, and to know if anyone could testify in his favor, and the prisoner on his way to execution had the right to turn back 3 times, and to plead any new thing in his favor. I urged all these pleas, hoping they might awe them into subjection, but they still cried, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" I then ordered Jesus to be scourged, hoping this might satisfy them, but it only increased their fury. I then called for a basin, and washed my hands in the presence of the clamorous multitude, thus testifying that in my judgment Jesus of Nazareth had done nothing deserving of death, but in vain. It was his life these wretches thirsted for. Often in our civil commotions have I witnessed the furious anger of the multitude, but nothing could be compared to what I witnessed on this occasion. It might have been truly said that all the phantoms of the infernal regions had assembled at Jerusalem. The crowd appeared not to walk, but to be borne off and whirled as a vortex, rolling along in living waves from the portals of the Praetorium even unto Mount Zion, with howling screams, shrieks, and vociferations such as were never heard in the seditions of the Pannonia, or in the tumults of the Forum. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. My guards had joined the cavalry, and the centurion, with a display of power, was endeavoring to keep order. I was left alone, and my breaking heart admonished me that what was passing at that moment appertained rather to the history of the gods than that of men. A loud clamor was heard proceeding from Golgotha, which, borne on the winds, seemed to announce an agony such as was never heard by mortal ears. Dark clouds lowered over the pinnacle of the temple, and setting over the city covered it as with a veil. So dreadful were the signs that men saw both in the heavens and on the earth that Dionysius the Areopagite is reported to have exclaimed, "Either the author of nature is suffering or the universe is falling apart." Whilst these appalling scenes of nature were transpiring, there was a dreadful earthquake in Lower Egypt, which filled everybody with fear, and scared the superstitious Jews almost to death. It is said, Balthasar, an aged and learned Jew of Antioch, was found dead after the excitement was over. Whether he died from alarm or grief is not known. He was a strong friend of the Nazarene. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Near the first hour of the night I threw my mantle around me, and went down into the city toward the gates of Golgotha. The sacrifice was consummated. The crowd was returning home, still agitated, it is true, but gloomy, taciturn, and desperate. What they had witnessed had stricken them with terror and remorse. I also saw my little Roman cohort pass by mournfully, the standard-bearer having veiled his eagle in token of grief, and I overheard some of the Jewish soldiers murmuring strange words which I did not understand. Others were recounting miracles very like those which have so often smitten the Romans by the will of the gods. Sometimes groups of men and women would halt, then, looking back toward Mount Calvary, would remain motionless in expectation of witnessing some new prodigy. I returned to the Praetorium, sad and pensive. On ascending the stairs, the steps of which were still stained with the blood of the Nazarene, I perceived an old man in a suppliant posture, and behind him several Romans in tears. Now, noble sovereign, this is as near the facts in the case as I can arrive at, and I have taken pains to make the statement very full, so that you may judge of my conduct upon the whole, as I hear that Antipater has said many hard things of me in this matter. With the promise of faithfulness and good wishes to my noble sovereign. I am your most obedient servant. Pontius Pilate. The Archco volume, Reverend W. D. Mahan, pages 128 to 147. In concluding the chapter, let's review some of the salient points brought out in this report. 1. The high priest who came to Pilate was deceitful. 2. Pilate would warn the Romans to beware of the high priests. 3. They would betray their own mother to gain office and a luxurious living. 4. Jesus spoke as a friend of the Romans rather than of the Jews. 5. To arrest Jesus, Pilate said, would have been contrary to the justice which has always characterized the Roman government. 6. Jesus was not rebellious or seditious. 7. He was at liberty to act, to speak, to assemble and address the people. 8. He was at liberty to choose disciples, unrestrained by any praetorian mandate. 9. This freedom provoked the rich and powerful Jews. 10. Pilate told Herod that he considered Jesus more of a philosopher and that his doctrines were not sacrilegious. 11. Temple money had been used to bribe people against Jesus. 12. Three powerful parties combined against Jesus: Sadducees, Herodians, and Pharisees. 13. Pharisees were avowed enemies of Jesus. 14. Pilate reminded the Jews that they were breaking their own laws. 15. He pled with them, but they still cried, "Crucify him." 16. He had witnessed furious anger of multitudes, but nothing compared to what he witnessed on this occasion. 17. It could have been said that all the phantoms of the infernal regions had assembled at Jerusalem. Such is the Roman version of what took place and who instigated the crucifixion of Christ.